Hello, friend. Today we are having an interview with Danielle Harrington, and she is an amazing writer. And she's also, I like to call her the Reels Queen on Instagram because she's got some really cool reels. If you haven't checked them out, make sure you do after this video. And be sure to hit the subscribe button and also hit the bell so that you get notifications of writing tips, writing interviews like this, and more in the future. Now, let's just hop into the interview. Hey, Danielle.
Hear me?
Yes, I
Hi.
can see and hear you. Hello. Nice to speak with you in person. Well, I mean, virtually.
I know. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good.
It's my first day back on campus for work.
Oh, yes. And you teach, is it like at a college you teach or?
I teach high school chemistry.
Oh, okay, yes. I saw your reels where you were like with the Harry Potter music
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're like, hello, wizards and witches. And I'm just like, oh gosh, that has to be fun.
It's a recent demo I had seen on TikTok, and I was like, oh, I could do that. That's fun.
Yeah, that's wonderful. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your books?
Well, my name is Danielle Harrington. I am a high school chemistry teacher, and I also write young adult fiction. My first two books in my series are published. They're the diseased ones and the unseen ones. It's going to be a 4-book series. That's what's planned as of now.
Okay.
I am working on my third book in the series, which has kind of been a little slow going.
Yep.
Because the world's been a mess, and
right.
Yeah. So it's perfect for fans of Divergent, X-Men, kind of just the whole dystopian genre. If that's like you like that, then my books would be for you.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, so the diseased ones. On the morning of her 16th birthday, Hollis Timewire receives the worst possible news. She can't become a citizen of the world. She's a diseased one. So she's actually born with this brain-altering biomarker in her blood, which actually gives her superpowers. And the government kills people with superpowers, but she doesn't know that when she goes in and she has this blood test and she fails. And so she's actually drug underground with a whole group of diseased ones, and she has to kind of wrestle with what's the truth, all the things that I've been taught growing up, or this group of people that I'm now with, and now I'm experiencing all of these things that I thought were a lie for the first time. And so it's really her story of self-discovery and kind of combating the brainwashing that she's had her whole life. I'm a big fan of like superpowers and stuff, and one of the shows that I was watching around the time that I drafted that was Heroes. I don't know if you know that TV show.
Yep.
So that I was like, oh, look at all these cool powers. So that definitely heavily influenced some of the powers in my book. Some of them are, I would say, unique to my mind in a way. I think everything's been told under the sun, so not quite as like, oh, I've never seen this before, but some unique twists on some classic powers.
What originally gave you the idea for your book, The Diseased Ones, and the series?
Well, the one of the books I was obsessed with when I was very little was The Giver by Lois Lowry. And that kind of turned me on to the whole dystopian genre. I also read The Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. That series is amazing. I was obsessed with it. I've probably read that series like 4 or 5 times through.
That's great.
And I was very drawn to it as a reader. So as a writer, I was like, I want to write something that made me feel that makes people feel the way that I felt reading those books for the first time. The like heart pounding, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? This seems like so scary, but also maybe a little close to reality in some ways.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, the TV show Heroes was another big like influence on the superpowers. And it was just like a combination of like different pieces of media that I was consuming at that time that kind of formulated the idea. And I think the initial idea that I had was like, oh, what if there's this girl that was brainwashed to believe one thing, but then about this certain group of people, but then she's actually one of those people, and she has to like basically figure out like what's the truth, what is
Yeah.
actually really going on here, and what's the real version of history that happened with these group of people that are the diseased ones, because she doesn't even know that the diseased ones have superpowers at the beginning
Okay.
of the book. She just knows that there was this group of people that had this biomarker in their blood and that they went crazy and they tried to kill everyone.
Yep.
And it's a good thing that we're trying to get rid of this biomarker from the gene pool. Like, this is the right thing. Humanity's like moving in the right direction. So she doesn't even know that there's like powers involved. And then
Okay.
she gets this really intense, really probably in many ways overpowered superpower,
Yep.
and she has to deal with being a diseased one when she's grown up her whole life hating the diseased
Yep.
ones.
Oh my, that sounds so good. Like just a lovely twist in there too. Like here she's in that club of hating those people and then she ends up being one of those people.
Yeah, and in some ways in the first book she's a little like, you just want to like take her by the shoulders and just shake her and be like,
Yeah.
wake up, you're so stupid, like but it was interesting writing a character that was so brainwashed, because that was the point.
Yep.
She makes mistakes because of how she was raised, and there are serious consequences as a result of that.
Sure. Well, that's wonderful. And I think like when you have books like that too, like the reader grows a lot too through reading books like that, because they're going along with the character in their journey and everything. So I think that's perfect. That's a great recipe for a good book.
Woohoo.
Yes. Yay. So are these books self-published or indie author, or are you through a publisher, or yeah.
So okay, it's kind of a little confusing. I'm technically a hybrid. I've signed with a publisher, but I don't have an agent.
Okay.
But basically what my publisher does, so I'm signed with Acorn Publishing, and they've provided me like guides on how to self-publish essentially, because
Oh,
they've done this. That the two ladies who founded Acorn Publishing, one of them is traditionally published, the other one is self-published. And they were like, well, you know what? The total self-publishing route isn't for everyone, because you have to figure out a lot. Like, it's a lot to learn.
yeah.
And then like the traditional route is very prestigious, but it's really hard to get into. And just because you can't get traditionally signed doesn't mean that you're not a good storyteller or a good writer. And so they wanted to create a company that kind of catered to kind of the middle of the route. So they provide like all this guidance and help, but essentially I'm still like, I'm an indie author, but I could also call myself a hybrid author because I'm technically signed under an imprint.
Yep. So basically you're kind of like signed underneath them. They represent sort of like represent you a little bit, but you kind of have done everything. Like you've done everything.
Yeah. So they do like a little bit of marketing on their author's behalf, like the cover reveals. They have like a newsletter and an Instagram page and a Facebook page and things like that. And then like your release date, they market, and then they have like different events that they put on and conferences that they go to. So for example, I'm actually doing my first in-person book signing at a Barnes and Noble this Sunday, August 15th, and that's through Acorn. So Acorn organized it with the Barnes and Noble in San Diego, and then some of their Acorn authors are going to get to go to this event, and the Barnes and Noble bought copies of the authors' books that are at this event. So it's exciting. And
that is exciting. Super exciting. Congrats.
Definitely looking forward to it. Thank you.
I bet you are. That is so exciting. So that's wonderful.
It's been a little bit of a weird shift for me, because when I wrote the diseased ones and the unseen ones, I drafted both of those books before I had ever even been to my first writing conference.
Oh, wow. Yep.
And so I had to do like so much revision and work on that as I was like learning more about the craft. And now I have like, I would say my writing is a lot better. So I'm improved leaps and bounds with both of these projects. And on my third project, I'm drafting so much slower because I have so much like going on in my head about rules and editing, and like taking a step back and like thinking about characters' intentions and motives and why are they doing this? let's make sure that the reader understands. So there's a lot more going on in my head, which is why I'm writing my third book so much slower.
Yep.
So in some ways it is a cleaner first draft
Yep.
than I've done in the past, which means my edits will likely be a little less extensive than they were with
That's a good feeling.
ones and the unseen ones, which is good. It's just like slower getting through the book.
Right. Which can sometimes, when you're writing it, kind of be a little bit like you feel bad because it's taking so long, but in the same breath, as you said, you end up with a cleaner draft, and then you end up happier too.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really cool. So do you use any like drafting methods like Save the Cat or anything else by chance that you found that helps or works for you?
A big thing that I think about now is like character motivation. So in every scene, I'm like, okay, what is Hollis's goal in this scene? Like, why is she doing what she's doing? Why does she want what she wants? And not just her, like other characters too. Part of what was hard about my third book too is because I started thinking of the plot line from the bad guy's perspective. I was like, okay, hit this guy. Here's what he wants. Here's what he's trying to do. Here is his goals. And I plotted him through the third book and the fourth book. And I was like, cool, I love it. And then I was like, he's not my main character though. So I had to go back and really think about that from Hollis's perspective too. I was like, her wants and like, at what point do they align and at what point do they conflict? And so that's kind of how I approach a book now, is almost exclusively through motivation of many parties involved.
That's cool.
But I think that lends itself to like a clearer direction for a book ultimately.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's really good. It's good to keep track of that, because sometimes when you're reading a book, sometimes, you know, if the author didn't really think about that motivation, sometimes you're like, what's the point with this part?
Yeah.
So
definitely.
That's really good that you pay attention to that, because like that's something I'm like trying to be good at as well. So a good thing. That's wonderful. Okay. And then let's see here. So what made you want to be a writer? Because you're a chemistry teacher. So what made you think, I want to be a writer?
Well, I've always enjoyed performing. I've been acting since I was very little.
Okay.
So I've been on stage a lot, and I always liked playing a character. That was always really fun. And I've always been writing too since I was very little.
Cool.
Like I think I wrote my first thing at like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And so that's always been a big part of my life. And then when I wasn't able to like be on stage as much, because my degree got really intense and I was working like 2 jobs and like just doing class and homework, I was like, I crave the performing. Like I crave being somebody else. And with a book, I get to play a lot of characters and get into a lot of people's heads and be like, why would this person do this? Or how would they act? Or what is the emotions that I feel in this scene? Or how can I get, you know, a certain result out of writing a scene for a reader? And so it is tied to performing a lot for me. It's a way that I can perform. And still continue to do the busyness of life.
That's awesome. Okay. And then, so like you said, you're working on your third book in the series, correct? When is that one due to come out? Do you know yet? Or is there a deadline, or when is it publishing? I guess
it's like roughly, I'm hoping I can get it out in 2022. I don't have like a release date yet. But it just depends on when I can get through my first draft, because once all of it exists, the editing, I very much enjoy that. And there's my editor is very good at what she does. So I'm excited for her to like dig into it and give me her notes and stuff. But that once I have the completed first draft, I think a timeline is gonna be a little bit more within my grasp.
Oh, sure. As the author reels queen, because you are amazing with your reels, what kind of marketing tips do you have for other writers? And I mean, that can be just directly about Instagram reels or Instagram, or if you do any other type of marketing that's worked for you. What are your marketing tips that you would recommend?
This is a really good question. Well, okay, the one thing that I would say don't do is don't
No.
just talk about your book. Like
Right.
nobody, like people are gonna get tired of that so fast, and then no one's gonna care about your content.
Sure.
One thing that, and this is different for every person, I guess, like thinking about content that offers value to other people so that you continue to grow. And it's really hard to grow on Instagram. Like,
It is.
dang, like I've been on Instagram like 2 years now, or maybe
Yep.
2.5. And I'm still not at 10,000, and I really want to get there. And I don't even know if that just feels like a pipe dream at this point, because the growing is just so slow. Because
Yep.
when you get to 10,000 followers, you can have swipe up links, and that's like
Yep.
huge and stuff. So that's a future goal that maybe
Right.
one day I'll get to 10,000.
You will.
I hope so. um, so thinking about providing content of value to your audience, so thinking about what kind of people follow you and what do they want. And some big things that I have focused on is like writing tips. What has been things that I've learned that have really helped me in my writing, offering like bits of encouragement, whether that's like quotes or like personal stories or personal
Yep.
thoughts on like my own writing journey, of times that I feel frustrated or down, or like, this feels impossible, or I've hit some snag that I want to just share how I dealt with it. And then I really like comedy. So, I mean, that's my
Yeah.
reels. I try to make them funny, lighthearted, but like related to like the struggles that we face as writers, the ones that we can kind of all relate to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Like your reels are so like relatable and everything. And I had to laugh because the other night I was watching your reels like when I was prepping for the interview and stuff and everything. And I'm just like, I showed my husband some of them and I'm like, this is so funny. Like I'm just over there giggling and stuff. So it's just so funny. You're so good at that. So like how did you kind of put together your reels focus and everything? Like you just kind of like find them on TikTok or you find them on other people's things and then you put your own flair to it, or yeah.
So it's a combination of a few things now. If there's an audio on TikTok or Instagram that I feel like has potential that could be twisted into a writing
Oh, sure.
flavor, I will save the audio and I'll just stew on it a little bit and be like,
Okay.
like, what could I do with this? And sometimes nothing happens, and sometimes like, oh, this is perfect. So I have a bunch of just randomly saved audios, and those are like the lip sync ones that I do.
Okay.
The like ones where I like act it out and I'm actually doing the dialogue of the characters, I will usually like write down like a mini script based on like a
Okay.
joke. So it'll be
Okay.
like, oh, like the therapist series I did where there
Yes.
was like 4 or 5 videos started off of a joke where it was like, oh, the writer goes to see a therapist and the therapist is like, what do you do with your trauma? And the writer's like, give it to my characters. And I was like, oh, that's a funny joke. Like,
Yeah.
I take that joke and then I extend it into like a script or something framed around that joke
There you
and give it
go.
kind of my own little flair. Um, so that was a fun little series because I was
That
like, oh,
was
I
fun.
could keep going with this. Like I could keep
I loved it. I was like, oh my goodness, that's so me. Like, oh my gosh, love it. It was so funny.
yeah, and then I enjoy the acting aspect as well because
Yeah,
playing the different characters is fun.
that's cool. And I also like how you kind of also did your own characters in it too. Like I think there was one where, it's like, welcome to Divergent Kid, and then it's like, I'm not a diseased one. And then
Oh
like,
yeah, that was one of my favorite ones. I had seen that on TikTok of a girl who basically did essentially that, but with like she had different like themes,
yep.
but she did the like reader head turn thing. I was like, those transitions are so cool. So I
Yeah.
did those transitions, and then I was like, oh, what books do I love? And so I did like 4 like classic super well known, like, oh, Harry Potter and like
Yep.
the Hunger Games and all this and Divergent. And I was like, let me throw my book in there. And it was a really good actually marketing thing because that one kind of popped off on TikTok and people were like, oh, what's the diseased ones? Is it good? And I was like, well, I'm the author, so I'm biased, but I think it's pretty good.
I love that. That's awesome. Such a good way to get people asking about it, and asking about your book. That's so cool. Yeah. So for like reels and everything, like if someone wanted to start out and everything, what would you recommend that they do just starting out? I mean, I know I've also seen like 30 reels in 30 days, those type of challenges pop up. What would you recommend someone who's beginning with reels to do?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me initially, and this was kind of like when I first downloaded TikTok. So it was before I even started putting reels on Instagram.
Okay.
It took me a while to figure out like all the settings. Like, how do I film something? Like, what kind of edits can I do? Like, what kind of transitions are there? There's all these filters, there's all these audios. So I had to kind of figure out like the app and like the stuff that I could do with it. And then, I mean, a lot of people keep like a little notepad of ideas.
Okay.
Because my reels, I pretty much only post comedy with that. Like maybe I've done like 1 or 2 dramatic reels. Like my writing is dramatic, but my reels are comedic.
Yeah.
So I've kind of put that theme on my reels. And then my reels are almost exclusively writer or editing related. Like,
sure.
So picking like a topic that you really are passionate about, because that's going to come out in the content that you make. And then I've posted 2 chemistry demo reels because everybody likes fire. Like who's gonna not like that?
I love it.
So those have been fun. I was like, I've thought about posting actually a couple more of like the normal chem demos that I do in my classes.
Yeah,
there's some really fun ones.
That's cool.
I probably will post maybe a little bit more now the school year is coming back around.
Yeah, that would be super cool. What kind of things do you like to do outside of your writing life and outside of your teacher life? What are some things that you like to do?
Oh, yes. Okay, I enjoy reading. I'm trying to be better about it because I can learn a lot from reading another person's style and storytelling. And there are certain things that, like, I'm very harsh with the book. Like, I know that sounds kind of harsh, especially now that I'm like really into like the writing and the editing process and like a story arc and how it works and like what you should do and what you shouldn't do. So I'm very like harsh with the book. And so the books that I find really compelling, I'm just like, what about this is so draws me in so much. And I try to maybe emulate that in my own writing.
That's really cool.
And so I can learn a lot from other authors in their like the way that they choose to go about a story arc and when they reveal things and how they go about certain characters. And it's like I consider it part of my writing education, but it's also fun. Like I enjoy it.
Yeah, totally. That's wonderful.
And the same goes for TV shows and movies. I make very quick judgments on like emotional judgments on how a piece of media makes me feel and if I like it or dislike it very quickly. And so the My Hero Academia that I had mentioned earlier is amazing because the stakes just keep getting higher. Like I'm like, there's no way that the stakes could get higher than this. And then the show does it again. So the way that show is put together with all of the superheroes and like it's a huge cast of characters. It's like the biggest cast of characters I have almost seen in like any show. And so I'm just very impressed by the show as a whole. And I'm like, I could glean so much knowledge from this.
That's awesome.
It's mostly just me consuming stories in different formats.
That's wonderful. That is so good though. I think that when you do consume a lot of media, like TV, movies, books, like you're getting more knowledge, like you're finding words that you can use, and creating more space in your mind and like the world's inside where it's like, oh, That's a really cool idea. But wait a minute, what if it was like this, or what if it was that, or
And this is actually something that one of my beta readers, she made a note to me, and I seen it in My Hero Academia. So it was like same kind of like theme.
oh sure.
Basically, she's like, well, you have someone kind of like rescue Hollis like in this part. And she's like, she doesn't fully get out of it herself. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, yes, you're right. And you don't have to have like your main character do everything themselves the entire time for
Sure.
everything. You can have other characters help. But she's like, when you get to like this part in like your series or whatever, Hollis needs to do it herself. Like no one else
Oh,
can help her.
yeah.
She has to, she's the hero and she has to figure it out. And I was like, that's such a good note. And so I
Really
took
good.
that and actually changed some of what happened at the end of my third book to make
Okay.
it like a situation where literally no one can help her. It has to just be her. And I was like, oh, that raised the stakes so high just now. And
So
the same
cool.
thing happens, and there's this part in season 3 of My Hero, essentially, where Deku, the main guy, he literally no one can help him. He has to do this insane thing himself, and it's so crazy. And I'm like, I just love that because
Awesome.
you can get help from your side characters, and that's all well and good because it works in several instances. But like the higher stakes come from the hero
Right.
figuring it out, essentially.
That's such a good point that your beta reader made, and like how that is so good. I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
so I was like, oh, duly noted, this is great.
That is great. Yeah, because like it just makes so much sense, you know, like when you think and you compare it to other stories and stuff, usually it's like the last part's like the hero is, you know, making that change to get themselves out of the tree, or, you know, to save themselves, sort of. I love that. Okay, and then so you were saying that you love to read. What are some of your favorite authors? I know you mentioned some of the authors that inspired you for your book originally, but what are some authors that you love? Who are some authors?
Well, there are some indie authors that I love.
Okay.
So Jessica Skurlock, her 2 books I've talked about on my platform several times. She wrote
Okay.
Pretty Lies, which was her debut. It was it's dystopian, adult dystopian or new adult dystopian.
Okay,
And then her
cool.
second book, Counter Ops, I read for a praise quote a couple months ago, and it's coming out in November. And she's
Cool.
really into like advocating for awareness for human trafficking, and she like a big part of her platform is like talking about that.
Yep,
And so I've learned a lot from reading her, and
that's
she's a
awesome.
lovely human, so she's definitely up there for me because
Good.
really talented. I'm glad that I like met her via Instagram.
That's so cool.
um and then another author, I guess she would be like hybrid or small press,
Okay.
is Victoria Mccombs.
Oh,
She
okay.
writes a bunch of um, like fairy tale retellings. Her debut was The Storyteller's Daughter, which was a Rumpelstiltskin retelling,
Cool.
and I enjoyed that one a lot. She's a full-time author. She's
Cool.
pumping books out left and right.
Wow,
So
that's awesome.
she has another book out called Woods of Silver and Light. I have not read that one,
Ooh.
but it's a Robin Hood retelling.
Oh, I love the
And
title.
then I got to read The Winter Charlatan, which is a Sleeping Beauty retelling, and that one's coming out soon. And that one, I'm obsessed with.
Oh,
It was
cool.
really good. She
That's,
has like a pirate trilogy she's working
oh
on.
my
She's got
word. I'm gonna have
all
to go
sorts of
check her
things.
out.
Oh yeah, she's awesome.
That's
Totally
awesome.
recommend her books.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Oh, that's cool. That's wonderful. They both sound like they're great. Great. I'm gonna have to, I always like asking that question because I'm always looking for more books to add to add to my read list. I've been
And
trying.
I really like reading indie authors or like small press authors.
Yeah.
Not that I have anything against traditionally published authors. Like
Yeah.
to get traditionally signed is like amazing, but like their book has so much publicity and marketing. It's like
Right.
they
Yeah.
don't need me to read their book. They got hundreds of thousands of people reading their book. So
Right.
I really like supporting like smaller
That's
authors.
awesome. Yeah, because you know, then the money goes straight to the indie authors, and
Mhm.
instead of a big company and stuff, whatnot. But yeah, that's wonderful. I'll check those authors out. Okay, and then what is the most difficult thing for you as a writer,
Hmm.
or the most difficult thing about being a writer?
Um, I think right now I'm just feeling really hung up on like the drafting phase because of what I mentioned before, like all of these rules and expectations of myself, and like I I think that my second book is better than my first book in the writing and in the storytelling. And I
Mhm.
think the third book is better than the second book, but like I feel like that's how it should be. Like each part of the series should be better, but
Yeah,
I just feel like I have really high expectations for myself, and like I'm afraid that like I won't live up to what I hope it will be, even though
totally.
it'll probably be fine. Like just until I get there,
Yeah,
and kind of see the full vision of the book like as it exists, and can kind of go back and make adjustments and tweaks and
totally.
stuff.
I get how that would
So
be.
it's exciting because I get like I would say overall my two books have had very positive feedback
Okay.
in reviews and like DMs and things. Like there have been a few negative things from people here and there, but oh, overall it's been a very positive experience for me as an author so far.
Good.
So in some ways that's very exciting because I'm like, yay, people like what I've put out, and
Right.
like they're ready for the next one. And but in some ways it's a little intimidating because I feel like I have to like live up to this
Right.
uh, person I've created so far, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, kind of
um
like the standard of like everyone, a lot of people are liking it, so you want them to still like it and not be disappointed. Kind of like,
yeah,
kind of like that a
yeah,
little bit. Yeah.
a little bit. So
You'll
it's,
you'll you'll do wonderful, Danielle. You'll do wonderful.
thank you.
Don't worry. You'll do wonderful. You've got this.
Thanks.
Yeah. So with that then, like on the other spectrum of it, like what is the most precious thing to you about being a writer slash author?
I really love when I get like a random DM or something of someone saying like, I read both of your books in one day. Like, when's the third one coming out? Like, I can't stop thinking about it. Or you made me like cry. How could you do this to me? Like, just the DMs of people who have really liked my books, and like they say that my series or my books are like their favorite books ever now. And I'm like,
Oh, that's so
ah.
oh, oh my gosh.
it it just makes me like feel really happy because I enjoy, as a reader, I enjoy the adventure. So to be able to give that to someone in such an impactful way means a lot to me.
Oh, yes. And especially in these days where it's like so crazy and stuff, that people can escape into a book and have this total life transformation basically, and then like be touched. And basically your story is living on inside of them.
Yes, yes.
I
And
love that.
there are some like characters. It's always interesting to me like which characters stick with people the most
No,
because it's very different. I like to ask like when someone's like, "Oh, I finished your book." I'm always like, well, "Who's your favorite character? What's your favorite superpower?" Like,
yep,
or what
that's
was your
awesome.
favorite part? And it's very different for everybody, and it
That's
just goes to show
cool.
you like everyone has a different lens that they approach a story with, and because of people's experiences and backgrounds and things, they're drawn to different parts stronger. And so
Right.
you never know what's gonna impact someone in
That's
your
so
book.
cool. Yeah, that is wonderful. That is so cool. That almost makes me think of like those quizzes, like where you find out like which character you are in Friends or something, like kind of
Yeah.
like that a little bit. You should create a poll like that or something for your like the different superheroes or whatnot. That'd be kind of
Yeah,
cool,
that'd be fun.
right? Oh
That's a
man,
good idea. There's a marketing tip.
right. Yeah, that'd be super cool, I think. Okay, and then so let's see here. I am just looking at my questions here quick. So what advice would you give to a new writer?
Okay, few things. Don't rush your project. Don't feel like you have to get published because when you release something, it's just out in the world, and it's kind of like a timestamp of where you were, because I think we all are just going to continue, everyone just continues to improve in their storytelling and their craft. There's
Mhm.
no point at which you arrive. I'm a very firm believer of that. There's no like, oh, I'm the best now, I don't have to improve on anything.
Yeah,
um
very
so
true.
not rushing a project is definitely key. Like, what if you need to take more time on a release, then take it. Don't feel like you have to like
Sure.
meet uh like a firm deadline. Especially as an indie author, you can set your own timetables. Even
That's
most
nice.
hybrid authors can set different timetables with their like imprint, and it's usually pretty flexible.
That's
Traditional
nice.
publishing is a whole nother ball game. There's like hard deadlines for that.
Yeah.
But the other thing is like learn, and there's a plethora of ways that you can learn. You can read other people's books published recently in your genre. If you're a sci-fi writer, read sci-fi books. You should be reading sci-fi books, and so on and so forth, so that you can see like what you like and what you don't like, and you can learn from other people's writing styles. And then take classes or read books that are on writing and storytelling specifically, or go to writing conferences so that you can take workshops, just so that it writing a book is not just like a internal thing. The author, there, I didn't realize this going into this whole industry, it's not just the author. Like, it's so many people are a part of a book being published, and
Yep.
I didn't realize like how extensive it is, because it's not even just your editor either. It's like all the people who beta read for you, and
That's a
people who
good
were
point.
involved in the cover art, and people who were involved in formatting, and people who give you early reviews for like the advanced reader copies. And like, before a book's officially released, it can go to as many as like 50, maybe even 100 people. Like, it's a lot.
Oh yeah.
And so, I mean, as an indie author, you can kind of control how many people, and that's nice in some respects. But a book is not just the author; it's a
Mhm.
lot of people putting into this project. And the
Mhm.
author's like the brainchild and the mastermind, and things
Yeah,
like that.
that's
So just
wonderful.
being willing to learn, and just continue to learn, because it's going to be a process, and your whole entire writing career, every book that an author releases is probably going to be better than the last book in some
Yeah.
respects, because you've just got more experience, and you've adjusted mistakes that you've made in the past. That, like, for example, I would say in the diseased ones, I probably used way more adverbs than I'll ever use in any book I publish in the future. But like, that's just that was my style at that point. And in my second
Yeah.
book, I didn't use as many adverbs and my third book, I barely use any adverbs.
Wow.
So
Yeah. That's
it's just
great.
one of those things where I've improved and I've grown in that aspect.
Yeah.
And the character motivation, as I was talking about earlier, I've definitely grown in, and I can see like, oh, this is so much more like, it's a clearer way for me to think about how to progress through a story,
Yeah.
whereas I didn't have that in mind when I started this series.
Oh yeah. That's such a good point. Like, and I love too how you said that it's kind of like a snapshot of where you were at that point. Like,
Mhm.
it's almost like a diary too. Like, if you think of it, it's a little bit of a diary from that point in your life. So that's awesome, though. That's wonderful.
Yeah, like I love the diseased ones, and I'm very proud of it, but I'm definitely a much better writer now than I was when I released that book.
That's good. That's exciting. That's wonderful. Yeah, cool. Well, I have two more questions for you. So the one here is like, what advice would you give a person wanting to be an indie author, like to publish their books and going on the route to be indie author slash hybrid? What would you recommend for them?
Definitely get involved in a writing community of some sort, whether that's on Instagram, or like you find a Facebook group, or like you find like an in-person writers group that meets, so that you're not working in a total vacuum. Because there's so much of yourself that you put in a project, but that can kind of blind you to the issues that your
Mhm.
story has. And there was so much I had to learn. I just I've I feel like I've gotten a whole second degree besides chemistry in like writing because of like the conferences that I've attended and the people I've met and the people I've learned from, even on Instagram.
Yeah.
So get involved, and before you jump in, like definitely learn. It's going to take a long time. It might even take a few years. It might take a little more, but that's important because if you want to be an author as a career, you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it comes with a lot of steps and a lot of pitfalls along the way. And so gleaning knowledge from other people, especially people who have made mistakes and are like really open about like, hey, I did this and it didn't work, and like, oh, here's a really big red flag, like watch out for this thing, like don't get sucked into this kind of scam or whatever. So take it slow and just kind of like take your time in educating yourself in the writing industry by learning from others. And yeah,
Perfect.
that's probably the biggest thing.
That's great. That's really good advice. Perfect. So where can people find your books and you?
I am on Instagram and TikTok under the same handle, at DJ Harrington Writer.
Okay.
And I'm most active on Instagram. TikTok can get kind of toxic, so I take breaks from it. Sometimes I just can't.
Yeah.
With that app, but it is also like a good space to reach more readers and marketing stuff. So that's why I have it, and it's fun because the TikTok editing is much better than Reels. So I make my videos on TikTok and then I put them on Reels.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then my books, you can find them on Amazon and Barnes and Noble online.
Okay.
And then pretty much anywhere where ebooks are sold, like Apple, Kobo.
Okay.
All those sites. So the two books that are out is The Diseased Ones and The Unseen Ones. And I'm also on Goodreads, which is if you're gonna review a book, that's one of the best places to do it. Goodreads is like the hub for finding books.
Yes, I love it. That's wonderful. Well, I will put that in the description for the video as well and everything. And thank you so much for doing this interview. And it was so much fun and I just enjoyed it a lot.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.